Moscow says Ukraine has targeted the Crimean bridge, which links the occupied peninsula with Russia. Social media video shows smoke rising near the structure. Russian authorities claim to have repelled the missile strike and say they will retaliate. Russia illegally annexed the Crimean peninsula in 2014. The Kerch Bridge has already been damaged by 2 attacks since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, for more, we can speak to Raphael Loss. He is a defense specialist at the European Council on Foreign Relations here in Berlin. Welcome. So this attack on the Crimean bridge, is it the latest example of Kiev taking the war to Russian-controlled territory?
We've seen in recent weeks that the Ukrainian defenders are trying to sever the logistics links that are connecting the various parts of Russia's occupation force in occupied Crimea, but also in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia in the south of Ukraine. And for that purpose, they've attacked the Kerch Bridge, but they've also tried to attack bridges connecting occupied Crimea with the Ukrainian mainland. All of this is an attempt to sever the logistics links between the various parts of Russian armed forces in occupied Ukraine and to make the hold on these territories more difficult to strain Russia's occupation of Ukraine.
All right, so you mentioned that this bridge is important for logistics, but does it have even more significance?
Certainly, such attacks also bring a certain psychological effect, both to Russian military leadership, but also Russian civilians that are still going to Crimea to spend their summer vacations there, participating in this illegal annexation.
Well, in another development, we've been hearing reports about Germany discussing the option of sending Taurus missiles to Ukraine. How important would this be?
This would indeed be a significant move by Berlin. Ukraine's government first requested the transfer in May. There's been some dithering in Berlin in a repeat of we saw earlier this year when Germany was considering whether or not to provide Ukraine with Leopard tanks, a very drawn-out decision. Not a lot of transparency in the decision-making in the German chancellery, but it seems now we're moving closer to a positive decision. And that would complement well UK and French-provided cruise missiles that are already being put to use by Ukraine's Air Force in order to target command posts, fuel and ammunition depots, and logistics links in occupied Ukraine, under the condition that those weapons are not to be used on Russian territory.
And if we look at the latest developments on the battlefield, in Kupiansk specifically, there is the evacuation of Ukrainian residents. What more can you tell us?
The city of Kupiansk was one of the early victims of Russia's initial full-scale invasion. Last fall, Ukraine's defenders were able to liberate the city in the process, discovering torture chambers and evidence of war crimes such as mass rape, murder, and torture. We see that the Russian forces are now again inching closer to the city in a slow grind, but this is intimately tied to developments in southeastern Ukraine. Ukraine's armed forces are making progress in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and I think the Russian advance in Kupiansk is an attempt to force Ukraine to relocate its forces in order to bolster the defense of Kupiansk and weaken its offensive momentum in the southeast. But as long as Ukraine's armed forces can manage the pace of both of these operations, I think there is some promising signs that strategic gains are being made in the south that would put Ukraine in a position by the end of the year to control large parts of southeastern Ukraine.
That was Raphael Loss from the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you for having me.